And now we'll generate thoughts of goodwill, thoughts of loving kindness, thoughts of metta, beginning with ourselves. Sincerely wish for your own happiness, your own peace. Sincerely wish for your heart to be unburdened, for your heart to be free. And then extend those thoughts to your loved ones, your family, your friends, your teachers, your spiritual teachers, your spiritual community. May they also be happy. May they also be well. May they also be peaceful. May they also have a heart unburdened, free. And then extend those thoughts to your acquaintances, people you don't know so well. And further still, to those who may not wish you well, who may even harbor animosity towards you, those who may even call you enemy. Even those that you might find difficult to be around. For them, with true sincerity, wish them well, that they be happy, that they be peaceful, that they have hearts unburdened, hearts that are free of greed, aversion, delusion. For with hearts thus unburdened, who could we possibly call enemy? And so with that thought, extend your metta, your loving kindness, your goodwill in all directions. May all beings, may all sentient beings everywhere be happy, be peaceful, be well. May their hearts be unburdened. May their hearts be free of greed, aversion, delusion. And with our hearts, with our minds thus uplifted with thoughts of metta for ourselves and all beings everywhere, let us turn to our breath. We will follow our breath for the remainder of this meditation time, creating for ourselves a pleasant abiding here and now, buttressed with our thoughts of goodwill, our thoughts of loving kindness. Let us continue in this practice together until we hear the bell.
Sadhu,
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 sadhu.
sadhu. Thank you, Subodha. And now for the Dharma talk, Reverend Kusala.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Oh, look at that face, huh? So last month I talked about the first two path factors, right view and right intention. And today I'm going to talk about the next three path factors, which will be right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Let me move around a little bit here. Okay. So those three path factors will seem pretty obvious, actually, but they aren't. So right speech, number one, or actually number three, right speech. There are four kinds of wrong speech, according to the Eightfold Path. They are false speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, gossip, and idle chatter. Those four kinds of speech increase our suffering and the suffering of others as well. So let's talk about false speech. The problem, as I see it, with false speech is it undermines the reality of the person that you're lying to. And if you're lied to enough by enough people, you may start to believe it as being true. And so this is an important consideration when we decide to bend the truth a little bit, thinking it's not going to hurt anybody or anything. Chances are pretty good that it will or could, and we need to be careful in what we say and how we say it. Now we come to malicious speech. And according to Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his book, The Eightfold Path, he feels that this is the worst kind of speech, even worse than lying. So malicious speech is based on anger and hatred, which really ups the ante when it comes to karmic consequences. So we need to be careful if we ridicule someone or make up lies about someone, or hope that what you say will encourage others to feel the same way about that person. Malicious speech is one that perhaps we have more control over because it's premeditated, and we need to think about what we say before we say it. Now we come to harsh speech, not having the kind of speech that's gentle and wise and supporting, but sometimes the kind of speech that happens when you're not thinking about something and you find yourself in a particular situation, and rather than responding in sort of a Buddhist practical way, you sort of react in a very human way and say things you wish you wouldn't have said, and then for the rest of the month or the year, you're trying to make up for those indiscretions, and it really can cause you a lot of suffering or discontent, and the person that you were harsh to may look at you now completely differently for the rest of your life. There's a story about, I'd like to share with you, about a famous Zen master. And this famous Zen master was renowned for his deep insights and his steady posture through hours and hours of meditation. And so he was having a retreat, and everybody wanted to go, and it was full, and the whole thing was just going the way it was supposed to go. Then on the last day, this famous Zen master stood up from his cushion and he farted. And everybody was surprised that the Zen master farted when he stood up. And now, for the rest of his life, he was known as the fart master. which is not quite as cool as the Zen master. But those things, when we think about it and we talk about it and we just let harsh speech or malicious speech go, it can affect people around us for the rest of our life. So we need to be careful when we speak. And then finally, we have the idle gossip and chatter. And if you have a television and watch it daily, you can find TMZ, the program, which is just filled with wonderful gossip and idle chatter. And everybody seems to tune in and love that stuff. But it really doesn't do much good to talk in that way, because it doesn't have any kind of viable substance. It's just thoughts, ideas, opinions, and oftentimes the other three, false speech, malicious speech, and harsh speech, are included in the gossip and idle chatter. So that's probably why it's part of the Eightfold Path, something we need to work on, something we need to be very concerned about. And we need to sort of weigh the balance between speaking and noble silence. Sometimes nothing needs to be said. It's not going to make the situation any better. It may even make it worse. So noble silence, sort of a good practice to have. I see I'm breaking up here. Interesting. So, okay, now we come to right action. And I love the Eightfold Path because we come to right action, and now there's three kinds of actions we shouldn't do. Okay, we shouldn't take life. We shouldn't take what is not given. And we shouldn't have sexual misconduct. And those three things tend to make the Eightfold Path an activity rather than just an intellectual understanding. So the first one is not to take life. And you would think that it's fairly easy not to take life until you see that cockroach in the kitchen. And then you say to yourself, I don't want that cockroach in the kitchen. Maybe I could kill it, and that would solve the problem. But you stop and say to yourself, I'm practicing the Eightfold Path. And one of the path factors is not to take life. So how can I get rid of the cockroach and not have to take its life? And you have all these workarounds now. You get the jar and you trap the little guy and you take him outside and the situation has been rectified. But then the next week he's back in. And so you catch him again, you take him outside. So what I find when it comes to not taking life is that it usually takes a little extra time. You've got the mosquito at night, somehow got through your screen in your bedroom and it's buzzing around. And you've said to yourself, I'm not going to take life. So you get up, you catch it, you take it outside. It's 3:30 in the morning. You go back, get a couple hours sleep, the alarm goes off, but you didn't take a life. You didn't take a life. So not taking life allows us, I think, to appreciate all the life that's found its way to this planet. They say it's very difficult to be born on this planet, and even more difficult to be born as a human being. You need a certain amount of good karma just to start off as a human being. And we have 8 billion people. And how many wars are going on? And how many mass shootings are happening? And how many people are taking lives? And you have to say to yourself, the Buddha really understood the value of life in the way he represented the Eightfold Path. He really understood it. It made sense to him. Okay, number 2, Do not take what is not given. It's not yours. You don't need it anyway. You got enough stuff. You're eventually going to have to just get rid of it all anyway. So when we talk about not taking stuff, not taking what is not given, it's a little different than not stealing. We can't even use a pencil on a table until it's offered to us. Theoretically, most of us would just use the pencil and put it back and leave it there for the next person. Most of us wouldn't take the pencil. But I was at a monastic retreat in Shasta Abbey a few years ago, and we were discussing things, and it was time for lunch, and we went to the lunchroom and we had lunch, and this one monk, this one Theravada monk, had a beautiful apple next to his plate, and he was going to eat that for his dessert. So now another monk, not of the Theravada tradition, comes over, picks up the apple and says, my, what a beautiful apple. You're a lucky monk, and put the apple down. Now what happened is ownership transfer had occurred, unknown to most people, that when the second monk touched the apple, it became his. So the first monk couldn't eat it. But there was a wise layperson that saw the whole thing happen and went over and re-offered the apple to the first monk so he could have it for dessert. So the moral of this story is don't touch monks' food. Let them eat in peace. Now, the third thing is sexual misconduct. And I don't know if you're following the news lately, but you know what? People are in court right now accused of sexual misconduct. So what did the Buddha say about sexual misconduct? What did he say 2,600 years ago about sexual misconduct? According to Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his little booklet, The Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha said, it is unskillful to have sex with people who are married. It is unskillful to have sex with people who are engaged. It is unskillful to have sex with children being supported by their parents. And it is unskillful to have sex with prisoners. Now, that last one sort of threw me for a loop. I'm thinking, what the hell does that mean? You know, how many of us have sex with prisoners? But Bhikkhu Bodhi sort of understood it this way. Do not have sex with people against their will. And oftentimes prisoners don't have a say in the matter. So those four things we need to avoid as a Buddhist practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And you would think that it is fairly easy to avoid those four things. But you know what? Lust can deceive you. Lust is an amazing energy that oftentimes we have no control over. And it deludes our whole perspective of what's going on and what should happen and what shouldn't happen. So we need to be really careful if we find ourselves in a situation like that. And I can remember I was giving a talk at a high school in Orange County, and it was an interreligious day, and there were a lot of interreligious people there, ministers and rabbis and monks and priests and all those kind of folks. And they were all talking about sex to the college or to the high school kids, you know. And so I went in thinking that, well, you know, I should be a bit more progressive. I should be liberal. You know, I've been around for a long time. I went through the 70s. You know, we had free love, which didn't turn out to be free, but we had free love. And all sorts of things were going on, you know? And if you did, by some chance, get, you know, an STD, a little penicillin, and you were ready to go again. You know, so we were just like trying to populate the whole world one more time. Thankfully, we didn't. But I'm thinking to myself, what I should have said to these young high school students, I should have said something like this. You know what? If you want to have sex, just get spayed and neutered, and there'll be no problem then. you're not going to have any kids. So the problem with having sex is you have kids, and a lot of us want to have kids, but then you have more kids, and you have more kids, and you get 8 billion people, and the planet can only hold so many. So what did the Dalai Lama say about sex? He said, everybody should practice birth control. And he said the best kind of birth control for a Buddhist is to be a monk or a nun. Then you won't have to worry about it. Then you'll just have to work with your own personal lust as best you can and understand a lot more about yourself than you would have ever done before. Okay, now we come to right livelihood. Man, this is a tough one. How can I work, make a living, support myself, support a family if I have one, and do it in a skillful, wholesome way that won't increase the suffering that's already in the world? So I was going through a list of jobs and careers and thinking, well, this might be good, this might be good. So these come to mind. Number one, garbage man. Now, I don't know anybody that ever decided to be a garbage man, but they're in our alley a couple times a week picking up the trash. And if they weren't there picking up the trash, we would suffer so much more. Their job is important. Their job is skillful. Their job reduces suffering. And I'm assuming they make enough money to support themselves and their family. So how many out there want to be garbage men? Probably not too many. But it might be a skillful way of making a living. Okay, how about lawyer? Is being a lawyer skillful? There are a lot of really good lawyers who make the world a better place to live in. And then there are some not so good lawyers who might not make the world a better place to live in. So it requires the person who wants to be a lawyer to decide what direction they want to go in. Do they want to be skillful? Do they want to be unskillful? Do they want to follow the Eightfold Path? Do they want to make this world a better place? Politicians. I never really liked politicians, but I realize we need them. We need them because we need to be organized. We got, 320 million people or so living in America, and we need to have, some group leaders who have decided that this is what we need to do as a population, and maybe climate change is important, and we need to talk about that and maybe act on that. So, yeah, we do need politicians, but we need good ones. Now, I don't know how many of you remember John F. Kennedy, but he was one of my favorite politicians. I was in high school when he was president. And he said, we're going to the moon. In 10 years, we're going to the moon. I'm thinking, man, all those science fiction novels that I've been reading are going to come true. We're going to the moon. And in 1969, we did. We went to the moon. Now, that guy also, I think, started the Peace Corps. He got people together. We're going to go into countries. We're going to help those countries. We're going to make their country better. That'll make our country better. And that'll make the people who are doing it better as well. He had a lot of really interesting ideas and good things to say. And as I look back on it, I'm happy I was around when he was saying them so I could appreciate it. And now and then we have another good politician, another one, got some good ideas, got some ways of making the world a better place and making America a better place, making Los Angeles a better place. So again, being a politician is right livelihood would require the person who is the politician to be on the right side, the wholesome side, the skillful side. And we can go on and on and on. We can talk about actors or writers. We're having a writer's strike right now. They want more money. And of course, everybody wants more money. And they want have a secure job where they actually have a contract and they're assigned to work so many weeks or so many months and da. Makes perfect sense. They've got bills to pay. They've got house mortgages. They got this and that. And so when you look at right livelihood, I think it's important to consider what you've done, maybe because you had to, just to make a living, or if you have the opportunity to do something that you really like and get paid for it. I mean, that's like the best, Most people just go to work, and they call it work because they have to pay people to do it. Now, if you find a way to get paid for something you love to do, and it benefits the world and benefits you, that's the best of all worlds. That's perfect. So when we talk about the Eightfold Path, what we're talking about basically is how to live a life. How to live a life in a skillful, wholesome way that reduces suffering rather than increases suffering and makes it just a little bit better. Now, I see by the clock on the wall that I've got some time left, but I don't have much more to say. So I'm going to open it up for comments or questions or criticisms, whatever you'd like to share. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? Da, 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 da. Hey, Nick.
Hello, Kuslu. Long
Hi.
time to see. Thanks for your talk, sir.
Thank you.
I've been a teacher for 25 years, and I'm looking to leave teaching.
Mm.
And I had never thought about being a garbage person. So I'll look into that. It probably pays more than being a teacher. A question I had was I belong to Recovery Dharma, and I go to these international Sangha meetings, and something that I keep hearing are our members talking about this is my body, I own my body, nobody controls my body, and so on. And I recognize it as possibly like a political statement more than a statement founded in the Dharma, because from what I understand from my studies and like what I personally believe, like this isn't my body. I mean, I don't own this body. I can't really control it. I can't stop being sick. I can't stop being old, and I can't stop death. And this morning I have like a lot of indigestion, and so if I own my body, I just turn the switch, So I haven't said anything in the meetings when I hear this, because I wanted like time to reflect on it and try and understand like what they're saying. At the same time, I understand like, the greatest gift is the gift of the Dharma. And maybe because we're all Sangha members, maybe I'm being called to say something. But am I incorrect in believing that that I don't own my body, or is it just a political statement that people are making? Thank you.
Yeah, good question, Nick. And you're probably going to have to say something eventually. So I came across this idea of ownership, and our problem as human beings living in America is we all get receipts, and the receipt says we own this thing, and I can remember back in the 70s when I was working, I went out to my car and somebody had broken into my car and stole my audio cassette player right out of the dashboard. And there was this big hole where the cassette player used to be. And I yelled at my car and said, "Who owns you, car? Didn't I buy you? Aren't I doing maintenance for you? Don't I have insurance on you? Who owns your car?" And so I listened carefully, and the car said nothing back. And then I asked my left hand. I said, "Who owns you, left hand?" Aren't you mine? Don't I control you? And my hand didn't say anything back either. And you're absolutely right. If we owned our body, in my case, I would look differently than I do. I would also probably have more energy than I have most of the time. And I wouldn't want to get sick. I wouldn't have to go get my vaccination so I wouldn't get sick. And then I wouldn't have to die, you know? And so now at my current age of 74, I'm planning on doing human composting, you know, as opposed to, you know, being buried. I really think human composting is the way it's going to go. But why would I even consider my body after it's dead? Because I know as a Buddhist, the Buddha warned us. Our problem is we're born. And because we're born, we have to get sick, we have to get old, and we have to die. So what the Buddha taught us is how not to be born. He didn't teach us how not to die. And so when we figure that out, how not to be born, what we find in most forms of Buddhism is not reincarnation, but rebirth. And in order to be reborn, the Buddhist concept is you need karma, because it's the karma that travels lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. Okay, and once the karma ends in nirvana, then we don't have to be born again. Now, because we had not much to say about being born in the first place other than our karma, and we don't have much to say about our not dying, because everything dies that's born, everything that's created has to be destroyed. To think that you own your body is the idea for me of human rights. Humans think they have inalienable rights, at least in America. And it's put down on paper, so it must be true. But back in the old days, back when the Buddha was around, they didn't have rights, they had duties. You had the duty of the father to the wife, you had the duty of the boss to the employees, you had the duty of the children to the parents. Everybody had duties. It was well defined. You knew exactly what your duty was because everybody told you what your duty was. But now we come to this enlightened moment where we shifted from duties to having rights. It's my right to do this. It's my right to do that. But it only becomes your right if enough people agree with you and feel the same way you do. And then that can change too, because everything changes all the time. So to see this kind of stuff, you know, and I have to agree that it makes sense to think that you own your body, because you might treat it a little bit better than if it's just a body. You might actually do your vitamins, eat well, go to the gym, listen to the sirens going by. You might do all these kinds of things. And so if and when you feel it's right to bring up this alternative viewpoint, that maybe we don't own our body, maybe it's just a body that we inhabit, and our job is to serve it as best we can. You know, getting enough rest, drinking enough water, all that kind of stuff. That's our job, you know, to keep it going as long as we can. And then towards the end, we have to figure out how to let it go, because it was never our body in the first place. So we were just using it. It served us well for most things. And then there it goes. You know, it's that ever-changing quality that we live in called samsara. You know, all the good ends and all the bad reappears far too often. So yeah, I think, Nick, you're right on. You're right on. And you've been kind and in letting them speak, because you're probably not going to change their mind. But if you can find a way to say, this is how I feel about it, without insulting or making people feel uncomfortable, that would be a good way to start a Dharma discussion with them. Thanks, Nick.
Kusala, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about death and sex. It seems like some
Do
of
they
us
go together,
something.
Steve? I don't know, man.
Well, I have questions for one that kind of hang in that area. First one, let's talk about death first. And it reminds me of the last time, I think a month ago in your speech, I brought up the dilemma of the bed bug. And I just feel like I have to draw the line that was something that's eating me. Like you mentioned, you can catch a mosquito if you're really quick and transport it outside. But with bed bugs, they're just insidious. And we're having another sort of war here at IBMC with them.
Did you talk to Doug about that? Have you talked to Doug?
I have, and he's given me several cans of very toxic substances that, when applied, actually do the trick. But yeah, it's just one creature that I just have to draw the line with, and I think that's unfortunate. But hopefully they go on to a better rebirth.
Exactly.
But and along with the sex thing. I really appreciate Buddhism, and they give you authentic sexual misconduct instead of the psychosis of Christian, Jewish, Western thoughts along these lines. You don't have sex by forcing somebody. You don't have sex with a child because that could mess them up for life. And you don't have sex with somebody that's already attached. That just seems so clear. That's really sexual misconduct. But I was wondering, in the realm of clerics like yourself, there are a number of monks around here that were attached, that were married, and many that were celibate. And I was wondering, do you think that being unattached when you're a cleric and being celibate helps you attain a higher sense of higher awareness, that sort of thing? How do you feel about that dichotomy between attached and unattached clerics like yourself?
Yeah, I would say it probably doesn't give you a higher anything, higher perspective, higher sense of self. I think what it does, if it does anything, is it simplifies your life. So you have more time to practice and study. That's about it. I don't think it makes you a better person. It just makes you a different person. And allows you to have a perspective that generally isn't encouraged. Generally, you are expected to be in relationship. You're expected perhaps to have a family. And when you're in high school, everybody's sort of getting career focused, and then the career allows you to go to the next level and blah, blah, blah. And then you get to be our age, Steve. And you talk to people that say, yeah, I've been married 3 times. Yeah, I've been married 4 times, and you just go, wow, okay. That's a lot of time, energy, and money spent. And the person that didn't go through all those evolutions, has a unique perspective and maybe a little more money in the bank. I'm not sure. But yeah. I've never been married, and when I was giving classes in high school, I went to this Catholic high school, and they all sort of felt sorry for me that I haven't really experienced that joy and bliss of intimacy in marriage. And I said, well, to be honest with you, students, I'm grateful that's the case, because my life has become so much more interesting in a lot of different ways because of that. So that's what I would say, Steve.
Thank you much.
Thank you. Anybody want to disagree with me? Hi.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. And I want to ask you the question. In previous answer to Nick, if I understand correctly, you draw the line between reincarnation and rebirth. Was
right.
it? If you can elaborate on it.
I can, because yesterday I was at Leisure World giving a talk, and one of the guys in the audience is a Tibetan, He practices Tibetan Buddhism. He's not Tibetan, but he practices Tibetan Buddhism. And he just kept talking about reincarnation, and the reason we have so many monks in America is because people in Tibet are deciding to be reincarnated here because it's a better place to be, and Okay. So generally speaking, Tibetan Buddhism is the only kind of Buddhism that I know of that deals with reincarnation. But they have an interesting blend of the Bon religion and a shamanistic religion and Buddhism, and so it's unique in more than one way, and that's why it's own school, Vajrayana. It's its own vehicle. Okay, in order to have reincarnation, you need to have a soul, and in rebirth, you need to have karma. So a lot of people just take for granted that everybody has a soul and that it exists and it's always part of us. And being born in Iowa, like myself, and raised in America, everybody I knew had a soul. Okay. And I never questioned whether I had one or didn't have one. I just, it was a non-issue for me. I was, trying out for the football team in high school. I didn't care if I had a soul or not. So then I come to Buddhism. And then Buddhism says, no, the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, born as a Hindu, very soul-oriented religion. It wasn't called Hinduism back then, but their idea is that you keep getting reincarnated until you get all the lessons out of the way. And then you merge with the great soul, the mother. And then your journey is over. And I thought, wow, what an interesting way of looking at it. But then the Buddha said, no, he said, I have found problems with that concept. And so what I understand to be the case is that we don't have a soul that's unchanging and independent. I haven't found anything that's unchanging and independent. I've only found process and non-event. Okay, so that's where karma comes in. Karma is the process created by what we think, what we say, and what we do. And the results of that, the vipaka, are the consequences. So we're creating karma. Karma has consequences. We're creating karma. Karma has consequences. Okay. So in the 1920s, I read a little bit about the 20s, and they had X-ray machines, and they were X-raying people to find the soul. And some people thought it lived behind the pituitary gland, and a lot of people just had their entire body X-rayed, and they couldn't find anything that even would resemble a soul. And then they figured out, well, we can find out how much the soul weighs by weighing the body before it dies and then weighing the body after it dies. And the difference will be how much a soul weighs. Well, that wasn't the case either. Okay, so we have reincarnation, a soul, many rebirths until the final end, according to Hinduism. And then we have rebirth, karma, many rebirths until the final end, which is nirvana, never to be reborn again because you have eliminated your karma. Did that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So do you have a soul?
I do believe in souls.
The best thing to say, I don't know. I don't.
But I do.
We don't want to insult anybody, and we don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, we don't know for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah, I remember I was giving an interreligious event in the Valley, and I was speaking to a Hindu, and the idea of soul came up, and I said, as a Buddhist, we don't have a soul, and he said, "You're wrong. Everybody has a soul." I said, "Yes, you're right, of course, But yeah, so you have to be careful with that because people are attached to having a soul and they think it's their spirituality. But for me, as a Buddhist, our spirituality manifests not in having a soul, but manifests in what we think, say, and do. How we live in the world, how we treat other people, how other people perceive us, that kind of thing. So, yeah. So it's a different kind of spirituality.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Good morning. Thank you for being here. One thing that I loved about, or do love about Buddhism, is that it's very scientific and makes sense. None of the other religions made sense. And I look at more of a practice than a religion. It's a way of life. I don't understand why, I kind of, I don't know if I have a soul or not, but it seems to me, I go with what makes sense. Like Buddhism makes sense. I don't see how someone can't have a soul and that soul have karma. Whatever you do, say, etc., has energy. Everything has energy. There is nothing but energy. Science knows that. So this natural laws that would just come to make sense, that everything evolves, everything changes, nothing is static, even the mountains. They change every day. We don't know, but what we do know, they change, but it's imperceptible to us on our senses.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I think of our body as a gift, and that we're here. We borrow, like someone gives you a gift. We have it for a while, and till we give it to Goodwill or Salvation Army, and we give our gift back to the elements. To the worms or birds or to the trees, as you're going to do.
Yeah.
And the last thing I have a comment on is I like the noble silence. If you can't say it, like the golden rule, if you don't have anything to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's tough for me, because I have to analyze and think before I do anything or say anything, evaluate it. I think that's where I'm at in life, is being constantly aware of what I'm doing, what I'm saying before I do it or before I say it. That's the big challenge.
Yeah. Me too, because I like talking as well. And I like the idea that the soul and the energy and so what if we have one and so what if we don't have one? It really doesn't matter. The Buddha came from an empirical perspective. It wasn't book learning that he was propagating. He was propagating what he had experienced to be true personally.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have never experienced or not experienced a soul. So when I talk about it, this is what I found on page 34. And so I share that as an intellectual understanding, but not an individual knowing. And I think there's a big difference between the two. And so we have all these books and we read all these books, and one of my jobs sort of is to talk about Buddhism. So I have to have some intellectual models that I'm able to share with people, so they get a better understanding of what I think Buddhism is. And when I say what I think Buddhism is, it's the way that I've understood what I've read and practiced. So I think it's perfectly fine to have a soul or not have a soul, or not care one way or the other. I think those three things work just great, because it's not going to make you enlightened any faster.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for saying that. I appreciate that.
Right. I think there's a knowing in your heart versus intellectual. And I think I know it, especially as in the hospital, and I actually went to the other side and I kind of got a glimpse of what it's like. So, and I was there, my person, not as a person, but consciousness. But I don't know, it just seems to make sense.
Good. Yes, it does. Thanks, Richard. Hi, Jeannie. Good to see you. Okay, I think we've come to the end of our time, which is about 5 minutes to 12. And we want to do a little chanting. And I see Reverend Kashanti passing out the chant books. So we're getting close to that now. And thank you all for showing up and spending some time with me on this first Sunday of the month. And by the way, happy Vesak. We did, the Buddha's birthday was on the 5th. And in the Mahayana Japanese tradition, it's on April 8th. So we got to celebrate it twice. How lucky are we? And I'll turn it over to Reverend Kashanti, and he can lead our chanting.
Thank you, Kusala.
Thank you.
Excited, and there will be food, which hopefully will be an added incentive to come to the service. This is also the first Sunday of the month, and so we will chant pages 4, 8, and 10. Page 8 is the Heart Sutra. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Mahaprajna Paramita Heart Sutra. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajna Paramita, clearly saw that all 5 skandhas are empty and pass beyond all suffering. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form then is emptiness. Emptiness then is form. Sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness, not born and not dying, not stained and not pure, not gaining and not losing. Therefore, within emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, perception, volition, or consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or dharmas, no realm of sight, till we come to no realm of consciousness. No ignorance and no ending of ignorance, till we come to no old age and death, and no ending of old age and death. No suffering, origination, extinction, or path, no wisdom, and no attainment, with nothing to attain. because the Bodhisattva follows Prajnaparamita, the mind has no hindrance. Having no hindrance, there is no fear. Far from all fantasy, there is dwelling in nirvana. Because all Buddhas of the 3 times follow Prajnaparamita, they gain complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore know that the Prajnaparamita is the great holy mantra, the great bright mantra, the wisdom mantra, the unequaled mantra, which can destroy all suffering, truly real and not false. So he gave the Prajnaparamita mantra, which goes Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhiswaha, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhiswaha, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhiswaha. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. When ye do Gongadu Ukfokat Punyate Nyadam Chunga Sange Aikam Tai Pada. When ye do Gongadu Ukfokat Punyate Nyadam Chunga Sange Aikam Tai Pada. When ye do Gongadu Ukfokat Punyate Nyadam Chunga Sange Aikam Tai Pada. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Sabota, for leading the meditation. Thank you, Reverend Kusala, for your talk. Next week, we do celebrate Vesak. And after the service, there will be Dana, there will be food for all who attend. So I encourage you to come to the temple again. We'll be happy to greet you and see you all again. So, any other announcements? No?
But he's not, but next week is Vesak, he's not teaching.
Vesak. All right. May you all be well and happy, peaceful, and free from suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for reminding